was intended to write some stuff up on the board this morning. Not going to do that. You'll just have to listen. Write yourself. Look at Acts chapter 20. There's two things that I would like for you to know. Sometimes, I would like to think, when I prepare classes and sermons, I put all of my research on a page, and then what I do is I run through it all, and I try and cut out everything that's not necessary. So I would love to be able to say, when I teach something, it's because I think it's worthwhile knowing. Like, I've cut everything out that's not worthwhile knowing. But sometimes, like right now, sometimes there's a thing where I'm going to say, you need to know this. I'm not going to require memory verses or anything like that as if I could, but you need to know this. Every person needs to know this thing if you don't already. There are 3 words in the New Testament. Last week, I think we actually talked about this a little bit, and we said, no, there's actually more than 3. But there are 3 common words in the New Testament that apply to elders and what we're talking about. What are those 3 words? How are they referred to in the New Testament? Shepherds or pastor, more commonly. So everybody across the street here, when I'm doing my chaplain duties, they all call me Pastor Boyer. Even though I say just call me Ryan, I'm still Pastor Boyer. Pastor, shepherd, pastor, exact same word, exact same description. What's the other word? Elders. What is one of the words that we use to refer to elders? Elders. One more. Huh? Jay, what? Overseer. I've got 2 places for you in the New Testament worth knowing, because in these 2 places, these 3 words are used in the same place to refer to the same group of people. And so you need to be able to know these. You need to know how to use these passages. In Acts chapter 20, Paul is leaving Europe back for Jerusalem. And on his way, in verse 17, it says, from Miletus, he sent to Ephesus and called the elders of the church to come to him. So Paul has spent 3 years at Ephesus. He has a great relationship with these people. He's got something that he wants to say to these people, but he's in a hurry and he can't go to them. So he calls the elders of the church to come to him. So mark that word, elders, the elders of the church. And then in verse 28, when he's talking to these people, this is what he tells the elders that he's called. This is what he tells them to do. Pay careful attention to yourself and to all the flock, in which the Holy Spirit has made you overseers. Here's the second word. In which the Holy Spirit has made you overseers to care for the church of God. That word, those words, care for the church of God, is the verb form of pastor. And so your job is to pastor, to shepherd. I wish it said shepherd instead of care for. He has made you overseers to shepherd the church of God. 3 words in one context to refer to the same group of people. That is really important. And it's really important because an elder is an overseer, is a shepherd, and all of those things go back and forth. So I am a teacher. I am not a pastor. I'm not an elder. I'm not an overseer. And I would really, seriously, I would say this in a serious way. Please don't refer to me as pastor, and don't introduce me to your friends as pastor. Sometimes it happens and it's fine. This is my pastor. But let's learn and do better. I'm not that. That's the world's conception, and it's wrong. So that's the first one. Comments, questions about this one? Elder, overseer, shepherd. Benny?
So let's say 15 years from now when all your kids are baptized, even if you're still preaching here, and then elder, then you would be a pastor?
Yes. Yeah, and so here's one thing that I say. Not all preachers are pastors. All pastors are preachers. If you want to say teacher. Don't think of it as like a paid preacher role, somebody who preaches and teaches the gospel. If you are an elder, overseer, pastor, you are a teacher of the word. That's part of the... So all elders are teachers. Not all teachers are elders. Make sense? Yeah. Did you have one?
Oh, just that the New King James Version does use shepherd in
Oh,
the
good.
spot
Good.
that you mentioned.
Good. There's another one. This is the exact same conversation, but it's the only other place in the New Testament where you see these words together. 1 Peter chapter 5 in verses 1 through 3. So I exhort thee... Oh, I'm sorry. This is important, so I'll give you time to get there so we can all see it in our Bibles. In verse 5, so I exhort the elders, that's number 1, the elders among you as a fellow elder and as a witness of the sufferings of Christ, as well as a partaker of the glory that is going to be revealed. Shepherd the flock of God, pastor. Again, that's the verb form of the word. There is a shepherd, that's a noun, and a shepherd shepherds. That's the verb. This is the verb form of that. Shepherd, pastor of the flock of God, that is among you, exercising oversight. Again, that's the verb form. That's what the overseer does. The overseer exercises oversight. And he goes on to say how to do it, not under compulsion, but willingly as God would have you. So you have elder, shepherd, overseer. This is one of those things you should probably know, the word overseer. In Jim, how is overseer treated in your King James Version?
Tell me again what scripture is it?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
1 Peter 5, which verse? 3. Okay.
Yours might say, since it's the verb, it might say exercising oversight.
Yeah, it's making the oversight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about... Jim, would you go to 1 Timothy chapter 3 for me, please? I don't know this off the top of my head, but I'd like for us to know this. 1 Timothy 3, what does verse 1 say in your King James Version?
This is a true saying, if a man desire the office of bishop, he desireth a good work.
Okay. In my ESV, it says, if the man desires the office of overseer. But sometimes when you hear people refer to like church offices, throughout church history, they've taken this word, this description, overseer, and they've said this is a bishop. The bishop is the overseer of the other elders, is how the world has treated this. But these two passages, Acts chapter 20 and 1 Peter 5, are really important because what they do is they show you, no, these three words apply to the same people, to the same group of people. There is no hierarchy of elders and bishops and priests. There is a group of men who are elders, overseers, shepherds. And please, if I can just say this one more time, tolerate me being annoying with repeating myself. This is something that you need to know. This is not something that you just let in one ear and out the other. You need to be able to reproduce this and say this and teach this to other people. Any comments about these three words and these two passages where the words are found?
Can you elaborate more on why, like the motivation of why we need to know this to be able to teach others? What's the hitch? How this has been recently tried?
Yeah.
How it's been studied?
Yeah, that's a good one, Dave. It's just, I think the reason why we need to know this is because there has been so much misunderstanding and so much abuse. That's my first thing that I go to. For example, universally outside the walls of this building and sometimes inside the walls of this building, I'm referred to as pastor. And that's not right. I'm not. I'm not overseer. I'm not elder. I'm not a shepherd in that way. And so just the misunderstanding factor and the abuse that's happened with an overseer is higher on a hierarchy scale, and we're going to create hierarchy scales within churches and organizations that don't exist in the Bible. We need to know what the Bible says so that we can do Bible things. So to correct misunderstanding is and it's not just a little misunderstanding. This is almost universal misunderstanding. That's number one. Number two is because of what we're going to start today. And number two is to say, you need to know these words because these words tell us what this man and what this role is and what they do. For example, Mike is a project manager. Is that right? I'm guessing that's right. Yeah, let's go with it. Let's go with it. Let's go. Mike can be a project manager. Mike, what do you do? He manages projects. The title tells us what he does. If I'm even, now I think all of us know Mike probably does a million times more than that, but you're sales manager, right? So what does Mark do? He manages salespeople. The title tells us what he's doing. Jay is a graphic designer. Let's just go with that. What does Jay do all day long? He designs graphics. The title, this is the answer to Dave's question, I think. Why do we need to know these three things and these three words? Because the word tells us what's going on in this job, who the person is and what the person does. This is the word that God has used to designate these men. And so I want to move forward with that and show you today what we're going to do. Today we're going to dwell on the word elder. And we're going to do that as a title and as a description and what it tells us about the person who does the job of elder and what that job is supposed to be like and what we're supposed to be like in reference to that job. So before we move into that, any other comments or questions by way of introduction and talking about the three words and the two passages? Yeah, Jay?
You just mentioned the first, I have the first Peter 5, I have my concept for the first one, but what is the actual verse?
1 through 3. You see it in verses 1 through 3. Yeah. 1 Peter 5, 1 through 3.
And what was the first one?
Oh, Acts 20 and verse 17 and verse 28, I think. Yeah, verse 17 and 28. That's right. Sorry, I misunderstood you there. Others? Yeah, Scott?
Just that on the topic of pastor, that can lead to conversations with people because they'll say, my pastor. You can say, well, are they an elder? And it can open up that conversation of
Yeah,
the correct definition of that term.
that's right.
Some
And
people, they just don't know that.
yes, that's right. And it's our job to tell people. And not only that, but Mark made this point in our last study 2 weeks ago. My pastor, singular. There is always, we'll talk about this as we move on, there is always a plurality of people in this role. Overseers, plural. Elders, plural. Okay. Here are the relevant passages. I'm not going to read them all. I don't expect you. You know, I see poor Jay here writing stuff down. I could just email you the slide.
Yeah, I'm not right.
You know what I'm saying? Like, I can easily just email these slides. If you want to write them down, that's fine. But I just want you to see in the New Testament passages that we have been referring to, these are the relevant ones that talk about elders and what we're going to do today with elders. There is one. If you're still in 1 Peter chapter 5, I think that this one is worth, I think it's the last one on the list. It is. Here's my question. And this is, I want to read this, and I want us to slow down and talk about this. These men, this role, are referred to as elders. So let's just dwell on this together. Why are they called elders? What does it imply about who they are and what their work is that they're called elders? What does it imply about our relationship as the congregation in reference to them that they're called elders? Basically, what we're going to do in this class is to say, let's take apart the word elders and see what we can figure out from it. I think that 1 Peter 5 in verse 1 is really useful because it says, I mean, all of these are useful, but this one is really useful. In 1 Peter 5 in verse 1, so I exhort the elders among you as a fellow elder and a witness of the sufferings of Christ, as well as a partaker in the glory that is going to be revealed. This is what you do, fellow elders. Shepherd the flock of God that is among you, exercising oversight, not under compulsion, but willingly, as God would have you, not for shameful gain, but eagerly, not domineering over those in your charge, but being examples to the flock. And when the chief shepherd appears, you will receive the unfading crown of glory. Now look at this, verse 5. Likewise, you who are younger, who is an elder, and why are they called elders? The very first thing that he says is, elders, this is your job. And then he says, likewise, in the same way, you who are younger, be subject to the elders. Clothe yourselves, all of you, with humility, toward one another, for God opposes the proud but gives grace to the humble. So I'll just open this up for conversation, broad scale conversation. You could say anything you want in regards to this. What is an elder? What does it imply about their work? What does it imply about how we regard them? Scott?
Well, the younger can be in age or spiritual growth.
Do you think that that's implied here is that it's you who are spiritually younger? I don't think so in this one. I think this is just surface level. They're called elders. Let's just start with that. They're called elders. What is an elder? I'm not trying to trick you. What's an elder? Jeannie?
Well, it's someone who's older.
Oh, someone who's older. That's all I'm looking for.
A couple of years ago, one of your children, at maybe only 7 or 8, mentioned to me, well, Nana, you are elderly. And she was, I don't know, it was Olivia or Lily, she was like 8 or 9. An 8 or 9-year-old knew what it meant.
Yeah, she heard that from her mom. That's how Becky refers to you at home. My elderly mother. Yeah. Scott, you've got in 1 Timothy 3, I think, Scott, your point is well taken. When you talk about this man, in verse 6, 1 Timothy chapter 3 and verse 6, it says, he must not be a recent convert, or he may become puffed up with conceit and fall into condemnation of the devil. So there's your point. I mean, there it is, just stated out clearly. We're not talking about baby Christians here, elderly in a spiritual way. But I think elder is just, frankly, an older person. That's why they're called elders.
Isn't that more in the context of the younger?
Yeah,
The person, you younger,
yeah.
is it spiritually younger or age? Is older people or elders?
Okay, so maybe I've just, so I think I've misunderstood what you're saying. All younger people are, by virtue of being a younger people, spiritually younger. Okay. Yeah, that's my bad. Good. Yeah. And so the opposite implication would be here is a Christian who's lived a little while and experienced life and gathered some wisdom is, by virtue of having lived longer and experienced those things, more spiritually elder than a younger person. Yeah, that's right. I'm sorry about that. Yeah. Listen, this is a good time for me to say this. I do this all the time. If I ever answer your question and it's not what you asked, just ask me again, and I'll try better. Other thoughts? Yeah, Morgan?
I think it's important to point out both people have character or good character. The elders are examples, and then the followers are humble.
Yeah. The humble part is really important, right? That's what he says. That's what Peter says to the younger people. Hey, here are some elders, and their job is to do X, Y, and Z. And here is you who is younger, and your job is to humble yourself and follow them and regard them as elders. Which moves us into the next part of this conversation. You can still talk about this. I want to go deeper. We can go much farther than this. But the next thing that we're going to push on to, and this might help this conversation, is to say, and how does our world regard elders today? Elders in general, not elders in the church specifically, maybe. But how does our world regard older people today? And you think about in terms of how that has been in the past. What's that look like? Okay, let's go left to right. Ryan, Dave, Benny.
I would say today they're really seen as being outdated or not tuned into all the newest things. And I'm not just talking about trends or fashions, but how society works. They think that their way is the old school way. And I think in contrast, whenever we look at the Old Testament, and we hear all the time, like in Judges, where the elders were called together, like the elders of the people, or in Joshua, the elders of the people came together. And so there's a great respect for them. They went to them for advice. Obviously, I know that they're not shepherds of the church in the Old Testament, but you can see the reverence for them.
Yeah. Good. Dave? You mentioned two things on my list that I want to talk about. And one of the things is, has anybody experienced this? I would like to hear your story, or if you've actually seen it in your workplace. Here's a person who's worked for your company for a long time, and they've got experience, and they've been there a long time, and they've got promotions, and they've got raises. And so here's a person who is up here on the ladder of your company who has become very expensive for the company that they work for. And so we see this sort of thing. Like I think I see this thing all the way. It's like, well, I mean, that guy's costing us a lot of money. Let's get rid of him and bring in some new blood that'll do this sort of thing. And so we devalue the age and the wisdom and the experience that this person has accumulated over a lifetime, over a career. We devalue it because that's costing me a lot of money and I can get it done for cheaper with a younger person over here. Have you seen that? Have you seen that? And I think what we need to do is I think we need to say, yes, this is, I don't know if this is a correct statement, but I'm inclined to think that maybe we are the first society in the history of the world to not emphasize respect and propriety towards older people with wisdom and experience. There's something to be dealt with that we need to get rid of. I don't know if that's an accurate statement or not, but it sometimes seems like it. We'll do Dave, and then we'll do Benny.
I was thinking in the alternative side of the coin, the worship of youth, and how there's a pursuit of the fountain of youth, the eternity of youth, the desire to look beautiful forever, or have the physique of a top athlete forever. This pursuit is constant, and it's not one that's just for one's own self-maintenance. It's for the perception of others and how they view you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so again, a devaluing of the wisdom and the experience and the life and the knowledge accumulated by virtue of life lived, the devaluing of that for the benefits of youth. I would rather be young. I would rather run a marathon than be wise enough to know, why would I run a marathon? Yeah. No, that's good. That's good. I shouldn't turn it into a joke. This is a serious conversation. That's really good. The extreme value of youth. Jim, I said this a long time ago to you. I haven't been listening on my runs to 97.1 on radio.com. Are they still doing it? Their motto? Younger, smarter, better. When you listen to 97.1 on a commercial. 97.1, younger, smarter, better. And every time I hear that, I think, we might be the first society in history to ever take that approach.
It's kind of the cheaper, faster, better. You can't have all of them all at once. You can't be young, better, all that at once.
Yeah.
You can be older, better.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's right. Benny, you had one.
I was just going to say in 1 Peter 5, 5:5, that when we do have young people that are like bucking the system and bucking the authority and knowledge of our elders, it creates for a divisive environment. And that's what I've seen in the past. It creates a divisive environment when we don't have the knowledge, we don't have all those years of wisdom, we don't have, and I speak like I'm young, I'm so stuck in the middle, but as I'm getting older, I'm seeing this more and more that, oh, cheaper, younger, oh, let's go with the newest, but the newest isn't the greatest. And we do live in an environment where, divisiveness, especially this last year, divisiveness.
So how about this? How many of you who are, let's be as inclusive as we possibly can. Let's say 30 or older-ish. If you want to raise your hand, that's fine. I don't care if you're 30 or not. How many of you have reached a spot where you look back on something and you say, you know what, 5, 10, 20 years ago, I would have been a hothead and done that a lot differently than I would do it now? How many of you have found yourself reflecting on those sorts of situations where you say, you know what, I really messed that up when I was young, and I think that I've learned something and I would do it differently now? That's what happens with life. That's what wisdom is. Wisdom and knowledge are different. It's learned and it's earned. Mark has something, and then Bob is pointing me over here to Jonathan. Okay, so let's do Mark and then Jonathan.
I was building off of what Dave said about the younger. We tend to elevate those folks to want them to be our leaders. And it reminds me of the children of Israel and wanting Saul to be their king. Because he was good looking, he was tall, he was like what other people would want and a king, as opposed to somebody older. Anyway, that's what I was thinking.
Do this, Mark, because this is a good part of this conversation. Look at 1 Samuel chapter 8. In 1 Samuel chapter 8, Mark mentioned the idea of, give us a king so that we can be like all the other nations. I'll throw some of these verses up for you in just a second, but 1 Kings chapter 8, and I'm sorry, I said 1 Kings. 1 Samuel chapter 8, and verses 4 and 5. Then all the elders of Israel gathered together and came to Samuel at Ramah and said to him, behold, you are old, and your sons do not walk in your ways. Appoint for us a king to judge us like all the nations. But the thing displeased Samuel when they said, give us a king to judge us. And Samuel prayed to the Lord. So here's where we have to do some really hard things in this conversation. Especially, I'm throwing myself in that younger-ish category here. Especially for younger people in reference to elders. This is why Peter says humility is important. Because our responsibility, our God-given mandated responsibility is to defer, humbly defer and respect age and wisdom and experience. And we'll see that in just a minute. I'll show you that. That's our God-given mandated responsibility. But to Mark's point here, in 1 Samuel chapter 8, the elders of the people made a terrible decision. And sometimes the age and the wisdom and the experience is not godly wisdom and experience, which is where it's hard. This is nothing worth doing is ever easy. And so this conversation is hard because we need to be able to rummage up the humility to say, most of the time, as a rule, this is the case, but sometimes it's not. And when is the sometimes it's not? And that's where we're going to look at the qualities that are going to help guide us in that conversation. Jonathan?
Also, just as a note, I mean, maybe as going forward with eldership and stuff like this, we have this opportunity to show ourselves apart from the world, because in the world you see a lot of hatred between age groups. And I think a lot of it's politically driven because of demographics, but like whether it's older folks hating on younger folks or younger folks hating on older folks, we have an opportunity in serving our elders and our elders being there for the church. I mean, we can be a light to the world around us, just by cooperating.
Yeah, that's as in all things. Let me throw this one up here. We're not going to read all of these. Again, I will email you this slide if you would like, but I would like to read a couple of them because this is the part of the conversation that, in fact, let me say this. Please read these. We don't have time to do it in class right now, but please read them. Write them down, take a picture, I'll send you the email of the slide deck so you can see these verses. But this is the thing, I think, as I look back on my own journey to learn, this is the thing I think that has really, this has really jarred me more than anything else that I can think of in terms of this conversation, because one of the mistakes that I've made in the past, and that I don't think I'm alone in, is when you talk about New Testament elders, boy, one of the great big hurdles that we have to overcome, and one of the great big dangers that I'm trying to avoid in this 12-week study of elders is, it is super easy to create a list of perfection that not one person is capable of attaining. And we say this is what an elder is, he must be perfect, and there's only been one of those and we killed him. But then you see things like this. The word elder didn't just grow out of the ground, like it came from somewhere. It came from the Old Testament, and you can see in Exodus chapter 3 and verses 16 through 18. This is what God says to Moses. He says, Moses, you go and gather the elders of Israel together and say to them, the Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, has appeared to me, saying, I have observed you and what has been done to you in Egypt, and I promise I'll bring you up out of... And he says, this is what we're going to do. In verse 18, and they will listen to your voice, and you and the elders of Israel shall go to the king of Egypt and say to him, the Lord, the God of the Hebrews. And so Moses and Aaron didn't do this job alone. They did it with the elders of Israel. And what is just, in every single one of these passages, what is really impressive to me, think about that Israel was a group of slaves. They were not a government. But even as a group of slaves who were not self-governing, they still deferred as a little micro-society of slaves to say, our elders are our leaders. You can see another one. Luke, I'm coming to you, I promise. In Exodus chapter 24 and verse 1, this is where the Old Covenant is ratified, where the Old Testament becomes the Old Testament. This is the spot. And I won't read all of these. I want to, but somebody's got to stop me. We'll just do this last one. In verse 1, God said to Moses, "Come up to the Lord, you and Aaron and Nadab and Abihu." That's Moses and the high priest. So the official leaders of the people. You, Moses, Aaron, his 2 sons, Nadab and Abihu, and 70 of the elders of Israel, and worship from afar. And then God makes the covenant in verse 9. Then Moses and Aaron, Nadab and Abihu, and 70 of the elders of Israel went up, and they saw the God of Israel. There was under his feet, as it were, a pavement of sapphire stone, like the very heaven, for clearness. And he did not lay his hand on the chief men of the people of Israel. And behold, they ate and they drank with God. Do you notice what he says there in verse 11? Of the chief men of the people of Israel. By virtue of their age and wisdom and experience and having successfully done life to this point, the nation deferred to them. That's a far cry from, here's a list of what you have to do to be perfect, or I will not regard you. Those are different. Those are different things.
So when I think about some of the previous comments about like how our society views the older generation, so we look at our devices and technology, and when it's brand new, it's great, and then it sharply declines as it ages. So like in certain other generations, like you carry around a hanky and you had it forever. Wash it, you reuse it, whatever. And then, but our generation, we've got a Kleenex, we use it once and we throw it away. Our phones, we keep it for 2 years, and at the end of those 2 years, it's an atrocity that it's so old. Whereas in the previous generations, you might keep a phone for 30 years and then fix it if something goes wrong. Or a TV set, you fix it, and now we just throw things away. So maybe that view to the things that we surround ourselves with has rubbed off on us as far as people too. They've served their purpose. They've already done what they could, and let's put someone new in there.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. All of these comments are good. Like I think we could. What I want us to do is I want us to think about, this is why this is a class and not a sermon. I want us to think about this together as a group. And I got some trivia for you here. In Homer, the Iliad, and the Odyssey, the leaders of the people are called gerontists. That's where we get the word geriatrics from. The older, experienced, wiser people are the leaders, and they're just called elders. In Sparta, the leaders were called presbys. That's the Greek word for elder, presbyters. The Roman leaders are called senatus. That's a Latin word that means elders. In Arabic, the leaders are called sheikhs. Sheikh in Arabic means elder. That's why I say, I wonder if we're the first society in the history of the world to say younger, smarter, better. And I think that it would be really important for us to align ourselves with the inspired principles given in the Word rather than younger, smarter, better. As we think about elders and who they are and why they are and how we regard them. I mean, I think about this too, and this is one thing that I forget about this from time to time, but when you go to a potluck and how things are different now from how they were a couple decades ago, where all the little kids just rush to the front of the line rather than this sense of respect for, you're older, you go first. It's a different world. And I'll tell you, we had better appreciate that it's a different world and that we are the ones out of line with the Scripture right now. It's not the world before us that was out of line. We're out of line in the way that we have done things. I don't know if I have another slide. I want to show you one more thing. In all of these places, you can look at these passages too. Again, I would implore you, please read these passages. In all of these passages, you're going to see the common theme of something like reverence. Revere the one with the gray hair. That's the theme in all of these. God himself in Revelation is portrayed as an old man sitting on a throne with gray hair. And you think, why did the Bible writers, why did God in his inspired word portray himself as an old man? Because they know a lot. And they've got wisdom, or they should have wisdom, and they have experience that I don't have and that younger people don't have. And it doesn't mean that, in God's case it does, but it doesn't mean that they're perfect in every single way. I didn't intend for my mother-in-law to be here today, but I'll tell you, I made a list. I don't see any reason to hide it from you. Just to try and not be uncomfortable about this, any more uncomfortable about this. I made a list and I described my father-in-law. And I think about a person who, how old's Dick? 70? For 70 years, he has been faithful and wholly devoted to his wife. It's not something you see very often in this world. But this is a person who figured it out, who did it. You see a person with a functional home. That's kind of a minimum standard. You know, if your kids get married and the wedding looks like a Jerry Springer show, it's probably an indication that something's not functional in the home. If you're a 70-year-old person, if you're a 50, 60, 70-year-old person, and your household is racked with debt and you can't manage your own self and your own stuff, it's probably not an indication that, you know, you're not in a functional environment. But here is a picture of somebody. 1 Timothy 3 and verse 5 says, if someone does not know how to manage his household, how will he care for God's church? Here's somebody who's managed himself. Dick makes me uncomfortable all the time because he says, all my kids are faithful. All my kids have married faithful Christians. And he'll just say it right to your face. He's like, I feel like I'm just ready to die now. Like there's nothing else for me to do. I'm happy. I've done what I need to do, and it always makes me cringe a little, but I'm like, boy, it's hard enough to manage yourself. It's extra hard to manage you and your wife. It's super hard to manage you and your wife and your kids and to bring everybody along on the same bus to the same place. And then once you figured that out, then you say, maybe I have something to offer to a congregation. Sober-minded, clear-headed, eyes wide open, sees things clearly. I sometimes get riled up and I don't. Self-controlled, respectable. Don't just say the word elder. The Bible says we need to appoint elders. Don't just say the word elder. Think about what you're saying. Think about the word elder. What does it mean? Who is this person? What is this person like? And how am I as a younger person to act in reference to the elder? Really dwell on that. Next week we'll do the same thing, but we're going to do it with the word overseer. Next Sunday morning. What is an overseer? Somebody who oversees. We'll talk about that. All right, thanks for your input today.